Henry said, we're going to steal and you're going to let us do it. You will drop the value of your currency and the prices of your goods to pay off my friends who are paying my firm, Kissinger Associates Incorporated. And $100 million of free imports was taken by the United States and is listed among about 2.5% of the argued growth in the U.S. economy during 1983. And the Soviets are about to exploit that grievance in Europe, in Ibero-America, Africa, Asia, and elsewhere. In other words, Henry Kissinger's foreign policies are working for the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union is prepared to make a mess of all South America through Kissinger's policies. We are ruining these economies. If $400 billion worth of investments in progress as of 1982 have been shut down, 250,000 jobs have been directly lost in the United States as a result of Kissinger's policies in Latin America. Implicitly, 2 million jobs have been lost because of Kissinger's policies in Latin America. My friends in Latin America are prepared to cooperate with the United States in reorganizing their debts and getting the trade and investment flow again, if we get rid of Henry A. Kissinger and his policies. In Africa, I've been working on the development of Africa since 1977 in a concrete way, when some scientists working with me produced a study on the long-range industrialization of Africa. More recently, I've published a number of books which are studies on the same subject for a number of specific countries in Arab Africa as well as in Black Africa, and done similar things in the Middle East, including a study now in progress in collaboration with some people in Israel for an economic policy which might help to get Israel out of its present economic and monetary mess. I've been talking with my friends in government in Egypt, in Algeria, Nigeria, Zaire, and elsewhere in Africa. And among the projects which we've discussed is a high-speed rail trunk line across Africa running approximately from Dakar to Djibouti. Without such a rail link, it is impossible to develop what is called the Sahel, sub-Saharan Black Africa. This would begin with a rail line in the northeast of Nigeria to a railhead in Sudan, through Chad, which means we're going to kick that Soviet agent Gaddafi out of Chad. And Chad, one of the most miserable countries in the world, is going to become a developing area. This is going to be a vindication of what President Roosevelt described to Churchill as American methods, American 20th century methods. To make that thing work, as the Mitsubishi Research Institute of Japan has proposed, we should proceed in cooperation with Zaire and Congo-Brazzaville to develop a catch basin in the mountains of the watershed which feed the Congo and other river systems. Capture the surplus water, blow a tunnel through the mountains, move the water across the mountains, and move them down into the Lake Chad region. Not just into Lake Chad, which is a pretty miserable dying lake, though a wide one, but into the Chad region, in cooperation with the 4 countries which already have an association concerning the Chad development area. That would transform one of the most miserable areas of the world into one of the richest. These kinds of policies have not only economic significance, they would save the South Sahara Africa from the chaos that Gaddafi and the Soviet Union are trying to put in there. It would also secure the positions of Kenya, Uganda, and Zaire against Soviet plans and British plans, in part, to turn all of Africa into an area of black genocide. There are people in Washington, friends of Henry Kissinger, who say that the black population of Africa must be wiped out by famine and epidemic. That is not an inference. I am referring to explicit plans. Those plans are already in operation. Presently, between 120 and 150 million people in black Africa are being murdered through processes of famine and epidemic coming out of the friends of Henry Kissinger and the Swiss bankers. Presently, 60,000 people a day are dying in black Africa from famine and epidemic disease problems caused directly by the policies of Henry Kissinger and his friends. The United States government is no longer going to participate in genocide against black Africa for the sake of Henry Kissinger and his friends. This nonsense will stop. We will proceed with the development of Africa as Roosevelt proposed in cooperation with the nations of Africa. Now, some fellows will tell you that the kinds of things I'm talking about won't work. They will say to you that everything is just fine, that Kissinger and his friends have solved the problem of the Latin American debt. Well, those fellows either don't know what they're talking about, don't know much of anything at all about this matter, or else, as in the case of Kissinger's friends, they're simply lying outright. The fact is that Argentina will not be able to pay its debts at the end of March. Neither will Brazil. These countries will be as much as 130 to 140 days in default. Other countries in Europe and other parts of the world are in the same situation. Our own internal banking system is in desperate condition. Don't let this whistling in the dark fool you. We're in trouble. We are on the verge of a financial crash just like that happened in 1931 under Hoover. And we're hearing from the government today the same kind of talk that we heard out of Hoover's administration back in 1931 before the crash occurred. We're on the verge of an international financial collapse whose effect would be to wipe out half or more of the vulnerable paper values, real estate and others, inside the United States. Unless we do precisely the kind of thing that I've indicated to you in this broadcast, we haven't got a chance. This crash might be delayed in the summer or the fall of this year, but we're on the edge of the biggest financial crash in history. And unless these kinds of methods are taken, there's nothing we can do to stop it. So don't believe those fellows who repeat the Hoover phrases about prosperity just around the corner, that sort of nonsense. Sure, there'll be a chicken in every pot, but who'll have a pot? What we're going to do is very simply this, to make it work. Federalize the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System in its present form is unconstitutional. As President, I will make the Federal Reserve unconstitutional. It will no longer issue money. It will no longer create credit out of thin air. The federal government will issue, as one of the first acts of my administration, $500 billion in federal lendable currency, gold reserve currency. This will be lent to private banks at 2 to 4% interest for infrastructural lending, for building up agriculture, for building up industry. By this method, we'll create 5 million jobs in this country by reactivating lost jobs. Then, in the area of foreign policy, we have cooperation with friends in Europe and in Japan and other countries. With their cooperation, we'll undertake the kind of projects I've indicated to you, and others. We'll do that by supplying export credit to our manufacturers to ship capital goods and heavy engineering efforts into these countries to participate with Japan, Western Europe, and so forth in making these projects come true. This is vital to our nation strategically as it is economically. War is not the essence of strategy. Economy and politics are the essence of strategy. And it's when economy and politics break down that war begins. What we must do is what John Quincy Adams spelled out when he wrote the Monroe Doctrine back in 1823. We must build a community of principle among sovereign nation states, nations which have the same values we do, nations which have the same objectives we do. And if anybody tries to destroy that community, we will, as one unit, crush the would-be destroyer. And we must have the military means to meet our part of that obligation. We must make our friends strong. We must bind them to us and ourselves to them by cooperation in economy and other measures, which assure strong bonds of mutual self-interest. That's the kind of foreign policy that I will give this nation. A foreign policy of which perhaps somewhere Franklin Delano Roosevelt would be proud.